Hi, everybody. If you don't know me, I'm your risk manager, Corey Moss, and in virtual land. And all you guys know me, right? I hope so. We do have an audience here. This is risk management for nuts and bolts. So first of all, you got to tell me, what is risk management? I need the smart alecky answer first. There we go, exactly. That's what it basically is. But the technical meaning is minimizing loss through training, procedures, preventive safety practice drills. That's what we're basically going to cover as an overview today. All right? So in the area of risk management, I like to call it risk-E business, because I got 3 E's. Can you tell me what those 3 E's are? Any guesses?
Environment.
No. Emergencies, evacuations, and executing a plan. All right? Those are 3 main categories of risk that we want to deal with. All right? Is risk managed just by me? Marissa, is it just by me? Who's it managed by?
Should be all of us.
All of us, exactly. We are all risk managers. So, if we ask that question then, what is your responsibility, first of all, as an employee? What do you think would be your responsibility as an individual employee?
Minimize risk.
Okay, but how do you do that? What's your responsibility? Understanding what exactly it is you should be following. What is your responsibility as a coworker then? Take those same practices, make sure that our coworkers, our friends, our neighbors are doing the same thing. And the key portion of this is, what is your responsibility in a supervisory authority regarding risk? And that is the key here, is trying to understand what's the best practice, and you need to know a little bit more than your neighbor. Isn't that correct? Because whether you like it or not, as a supervisory person, your employees are going to look to you for answers, especially in a crisis. All right? So let's start looking at those things. You should be aware of what kind of things? Like no personal space heaters or refrigerators in your workspace, unless medically authorized. Is everyone clear on that? Okay, and how do you get a medical authorization? Doctor's note, and you work through HR, Kathy or Armand. Okay, you should be aware of things like no placing combustible materials above 24 inches from the ceiling or 18 inches in a sprinkled building. I run into this problem all the time, storage areas, anything that's flammable, like paper, cardboard, anything you can put a match to is combustible material. Any questions on that? No real Christmas trees or decorations that can be flammable. We almost lost the governor's office or governor's mansion a few years back with a faulty wiring and a Christmas tree. That's why we don't allow real foliage, real Christmas trees in our offices. You should be aware of no candles or candle warmers. Why is this a problem?
They get left on.
Well, the obvious reason, yeah, we got open flame or it could be left on. What are some of the not so?
Smell, irritate.
Exactly. These kind of things can set off and trigger migraines and other allergic reactions. So you just don't do that. What else might you find? We had a few incidents. These were popular a few years back, and we actually had some incidents where some kids had pulled it down and got some nice wax burns. So they're just dangerous all the way around, and usually these are kind of cheap hot plates, and we just don't allow them. All right? Also, no permanent use of extension cords. It is the fire marshal and risk says we should never have a extension cord plugged in permanently. All right? That's just a problem waiting to happen. So we'll often run into situations where wherever the projector or something's set up in an area, it doesn't quite make it, so somebody plugs in an extension cord and leaves it. Now, if it's a properly rated cord, it can be used temporarily, as long as you try to minimize and avoid tripping hazards. But no, yes?
That doesn't apply necessarily to like power strips.
No.
Okay.
And we're going to get to that, but we also want to make sure that there is no use of non-grounded, non-rated extension cords. And we're all familiar with those. They're usually green, white, or red, or brown. This was a real problem. As you can see, I mean, the lights in here kind of minimize this picture, but as you can see, there is an extension cord, a cheapo, like one of these green ones, had 2 transformers plugged into it. When I reached under the table, and this is one of our offices, here you've got on the floor, you've got some paper stacked within a few inches, and that cord was piping hot. The draw on that is horrible, and I could almost pull it apart. So it's really a dangerous situation when you start using non-rated, non-grounded extension cords. So they're just plain not allowed. So if you see someone bringing their own in, plugging it in, tell them not to use it. Okay? And we all know the daisy chain, right? What is a daisy chain?
Multiple outlets plug in to other multiple outlets.
Exactly. And we have come a long way in this department. We used to find several hundred just a few years back. And now, so far in our inspections this year, I found 1. So that's awesome. So people are understanding, and I like that. I get a kick out of the fact when I walk into an office these days, somebody will say, watch out for my daisy chain, or I'll hear somebody echo, oh, I got to get rid of my daisy chain and my fridge and my heater. So I appreciate the fact that people are learning that. And as supervisors, we want to keep that going. We also need to be aware of things like no hanging things from the ceiling. Sometimes we get special permission on a floor from DFCM to hang a recognized banner for Employee of the Month or something of that nature, but that must be approved. We're just not authorized to hang anything from our ceilings. It must be approved by DFCM or the facilities coordinator in our leased facilities, okay? Also, no modifying of lights in the work area without medical and our facilities approval. So just don't get up there and take bulbs out. First of all, it can do damage to our ballasts in the lights, but it's just not allowed. It must be approved through HR with a medical, and it must be done by DFCM or the facilities coordinator in conjunction with the landlord in our leased facilities. Any questions on that? This continues to be a problem in some areas. No tampering with or modifying the heating, venting, and air conditioning. Now, what does that mean? Some might say, well, I don't even know how to mess with it. How might our standard employees mess with it? What? Cover up the vents. Might go up there, and we just went to one, well, I won't point out the office, but we just went to one, went in the office, and somebody had taped up a file folder over their vent. That disrupts the system and creates a problem, plus you're putting combustible material within 24 inches of the ceiling. So you got multiple problems there. You do not modify the heating, venting, or air conditioning. We had some concern in this building where actually some really smart DTS people hooked their computer up somehow. We went in one room, wondered why the outlying areas were all out of whack. We saw a computer with wires hooked up to the thermostat. Did their own modifying. Now, of course, that wasn't any DWS people, but still, in this building, that's a problem. Do not do it. RISC would really like us to not use chair mats or carpet protectors. Why is that, you think? What?
Trip hazard.
Trip hazard. It's amazing. Before we made this recommendation and really try to curtail it, there was probably an average, I think they said 1.5 incidents per month across the state related to getting hurt with chair mats. Anywhere from people tipping them up to clean their areas and they got those spikes on the bottom and they'd fall and rip skin, to trip hazards, especially ones that are older and curling. So we can use them in rare occasions, but risk has asked that they be approved by me and for a particular reason. So we just ask that if someone really needs one, and there are good reasons. We've got areas where carpet, is delaminated, and that's a problem, so it's a greater trip hazard, or someone needs, for mobility's sake, to have the carpet protector. So there are several out there, but they must be approved. And the other question of the decade is rubber balls for chairs. This has been a problem. Risk would really prefer that we don't have them. And so we tried to restrict them. There was so much fired up asking of, well, can we use these, that we asked Risk to look into it. And not just our agency, but across the state. So basically what it boiled down to, and we've rewritten our policy at this time, is that we don't want anybody utilizing just a rubber ball for a chair. But if it's recommended by the ergonomic specialist, then we can get one. And we also pushed it just a step further, kind of a little against my best thought on the process, plus Risk. But since it was asked, Risk told us that if someone wants a ball chair really bad, and it's an approved model and has a back to it, then they can buy their own and bring it in. The trouble with this is that we're allowing people to bring in their own furniture. And we really try to get away from that as much as we can. So what I would like to say is try to discourage it, but if they're really pushing it, and their chiropractor or doctor, their medical professional is pushing that they do it, and it's for healthy Utah reason of some nature, then there's a couple of models that they can purchase on their own and bring them in. Any questions on that? All right. In the area of risk, I like to recognize and implement what I like to call the what-if process regarding safety. There's so many areas that we can't cover them all today, obviously. But what if you suddenly encounter smoke in the building? Do you know what you and your crew would do? What if you start experiencing a major earthquake? We've gone through the drill. What's the first thing we do? What have we learned now 3 years in a row? Drop what? What is it?
Cover and hold on.
There we go. Drop, cover, and hold on. Why is that simple three-word, three-concept, three-phrase concept so important? Why do you think? Because we could talk about earthquakes for, half hour, 45 minutes, or an hour.
Many major injuries.
What's the main thing we're doing, though?
Reducing panic.
Panic to some degree. That's a good comment. That's not where I was going to, but that's good in the sense that we've practiced something so that there's less panic. But our main objective in doing the drop, cover, and hold on is one thing: to protect the noggin. Because in the process of an earthquake, you might get injured, but how well can you ask for help, scream for help, or help others if you're unconscious? So the main objective to everything that we talk about with earthquakes is simply the fact that you protect your noggin so that you can remain conscious when that earthquake subsides. So there's something you can do about it. You can't stop a bleeder if you're unconscious. So that's the main objective. What if you open some mail and find some foreign material in it? This is becoming much and much less of a problem because we receive much less mail than we used to. But many of you might be aware that about 5 years ago, we received some mail here, and somebody called me and says, "Corey, we got some mail we'd like you to come down and look at." And we had some threatening mail, threatening people, threatening us. So I went down to look at it. I should have asked one more question when they called me. What should I have asked? Why? I go down, walk up, and there's about 5 people clustered around looking at this mail. and I look in there and I see white powder. So guess what happened to me, the risk manager in this building, and 5 other people? We got quarantined. Exactly. It was kind of sad. So we're stuck in a room. We've called the authorities. They come in their hazmat suits. They look like Darth Vader's going, looking at everything, and I'm stuck in the room. And then we're being threatened that we're going to have to go out in the plaza and be showered off. Well, to make a long story short, after a few hours, it turned out to be frosting that somebody had on their hands and put in a form in the envelope, and then it dried and kind of crystallized. But we have to be careful. So the thing you want to make sure in what I want to get across is if you do receive some kind of a package or mail, especially these days, be very careful. And if you see something that's strange, you don't do what? Dale, come on over here and take a look what I got here. You know, don't expose other people. What if, to your shock, you're suddenly part of a hostage situation? We'll talk a little bit more about that. And what if you and your coworkers have to evacuate? Those are the things that you should automatically what if in your mind. That's why the department has safety and security plans, and every facility out there, every floor of this building should have an emergency preparation and evacuation manual or plan. So make sure that you're reviewing those. They have a lot of information that we can reference in any kind of an emergency. Also, like various CMS trainings that we have and classrooms like this. So the key here, though, that I want you to do is talk about it amongst your people. Now, what if we have an accident with a possible injury? What do we do? Okay, if it's serious, yeah, don't mess around. Call 911, get the ambulance here, get the paramedics here. If someone just comes and tells you they've been injured on the job, what do you do? Where do you send them?
HR.
You could, but, you know, Armand, do you want to have every call come to you and so you can tell them where to go? As a supervisor, you want to send them to the preferred provider, all right? And that's typically an urgent care, work med, or hospital is appropriate. And we have a list. So if you don't know what that is, you might be able to call Armand, Kathy, Lewis, or me, and we can get you that information. But it's a really good idea that you know this, because it's a lot more complicated if they don't go to the preferred provider, all right? And it's a good idea to not only let your supervisor know, but let Kathy, Armand, or me just slip a quick email letting us know that there's been an injury, all right? And this is just a quick list, we won't dwell on this, of where the work meds and urgent care facilities are in all the areas. And it'd be a good idea as a supervisor, especially in outlying areas, to just find out where that is so that you know and you can reference it right away. Okay, so to summarize this section, play the what if game in your mind, form the habit of doing that. Because as many risk managers, you are doing risk assessments all the time. The minute you get in your car, you're doing a risk assessment, aren't you? We're looking both ways. We're checking our gauges. We are risk assessing whether you know it or not. And we do that a lot in life. So we should also be thinking about what if. Ergonomic evaluation requests. Now this has changed recently. Hopefully most of you have recognized this. But let's go over it really quick. First of all, in the area of ergonomics, we want to make sure that you as supervisors, we as a department, are trying to promote healthy posture at our workstations. So try to make sure and look at your employees. Are they slouching really bad in their chairs? Have they got good upright positioning? Is their monitor in a good place so that they're not cranking their head up or down too far. A lot of things can be eliminated. The proper use of a mouse. Over time, it doesn't seem much when we're younger, but by the time we get to be 40, 50 years old, doing things improperly, then we have a lot of the carpal tunnel problems and a lot of other tendon problems, and they're called cumulative trauma. So we can avoid a lot of that by having proper positioning. We should also promote with our staff, every couple of hours, just take 2-3 minutes and do some slow stretching exercises. And don't rush into them, because that can create injury from being motionless, so to speak, for a couple of hours. Get up and do some slow stretches, and that will help us all. But if we need an ergonomic evaluation, because things were getting out of hand to some degree, and our evaluators were overloaded, we're trying to work with them to minimize that. So basically, this is the policy, a lot's here, but the bottom line is call Kathy Lewis or Armand Drummond from HR to get the process started. And they'll give you, that employee, the proper forms. And the reason we're going through this is because of the HIPAA laws that needs to go through HR. We don't want you as supervisors receiving medical information. You shouldn't be getting the doctor's notes. All those things should go to the HR specialist over your area. And with that, then they'll give you the proper forms to have your doctor fill out. With that, then that specialist will get that information and do an approval right off the bat. If they need more information, they'll request it, and then the process proceeds in that way. All right? Once they get that information and the proper information from the doctor, then they can recommend that the evaluation go through, and it will go to the consultant with the state. Once the report, once the ergonomic evaluation is done, sometime thereafter, and I get this question a lot, is how long does it take? Well, it depends on how overloaded they are, and they've been overloaded. So sometimes it takes a few weeks to actually get that report. So even though you might have had the evaluation done today, I might not actually even see the report for 3 or 4 weeks. And then we have to order things sometimes. So just be aware that it's not an instant situation. It's not going to happen just in a couple of days. But basically that's what will happen. And then if there's certain items, modifications to the work area or items to be purchased, that will take place. Any questions on ergonomic evaluations? All right, what do you think are the top 2 incident reporting categories most cited in the past 4 years?
Slip, strips, and falls.
Slip, strips, and falls? That's typically number 4, 3 or 4. What else do you think? Hernia? No, we actually haven't had a lot of those, maybe a couple. Anything else?
Like a customer threat or...
There we go. Dale came up with it. Hostile and threatening behaviors, and the ones that are really hard to fully categorize, I call questionable behaviors. And we don't see that as much here at admin, of course, but out in our employment centers, this really is our top category winners. And that's unfortunate. So, because we have to deal with hostile, angry, agitated, and threatening customers, and the occasional coworker, what should we try to do when we have a situation like this?
Remain calm.
Try to remain calm. Let's go over some of those things. Obviously, the best you can at the moment, right? Well, that's too simple of an answer. So we need to be as mentally prepared for these things as they come up. So let's talk about it. Become as familiar with the information provided to you as possible. So things we're talking about right now, information that you'll get in other trainings, be familiar with it. Talk strategies over with your coworkers. Nothing's better than developing code words in the office to strike up some kind of mechanism that will alert others, because sometimes things are starting to build and other people aren't aware of it. If you can use some kind of a code word or situation, then the word can spread. Also, If you feel that you are in danger, as soon as possible or feasible, call the proper authorities, whether it be the police, the sheriff, or the security guard. Pay attention to detail. Now this one I want to key in on, because whether we fully understand it or not, trying to pay attention to details as if you are going to write an incident report or tell a police officer what took place, think of it that way. The more you concentrate on that and all the details as if you're going to relate it to someone else here shortly, it actually helps you be more calm and in control of a crisis. So pay attention to the details as if you're going to describe it. And after the incident, take that information and write it up in an incident report, which we'll go over at the end. So the big concern is, what if you're faced with an angry customer or coworker displaying some kind of behavior that's tough to deal with? So unfortunately, we need to review and discuss violence in the workplace. The first thing we want to talk about is violence in the workplace. Is any of you familiar with this wheel? This is the domestic violence wheel. And we're not going to spend a lot of time on this. This is an overview session. But what are some of the signs from a coworker that they might be involved in some kind of domestic abuse situation? Physical markings, bruises that are appearing. And you might ask them, what's up? And they're evasive. What other signs might we have that a coworker is being affected? Erratic attendance. A lot of sick leave being used, odd doctor appointments. It's not like the olden days or as it's portrayed in the TV and movies where someone comes in with their sunglasses on saying, "Oh, I ran into the door." Perpetrators these days are often hurting their partner to the torso, or even worse, to some degree, emotionally. It's just horrible situation. So some of the signs that we might find is that, and it's a lot like we get public service announcements of individuals that are on drugs. It really is. You got poor behavior at work, a lot of missed time, standoffish. They used to go to lunch with you, now they don't, because they're trying to avoid it. So what is your responsibility as a co-worker, or especially in this role as a supervisor? Should you be their counselor? No, absolutely not. That is not what you're to do. If they are to ask you, if they did come to you, what would you do? Find them resources, just like we would our customers. And that's what we would want to do. And we would want to refer them to HR, so they can further get the help they need. So again, we won't dwell on this very long, but domestic violence is still a big concern and it is growing. So we need to be aware and look at the signs so that we don't leave someone lurking out there to be further damaged. And how would you feel if all of a sudden they ended up dying at the hand of a partner because we didn't do something? Now, suicide threats, this is also climbing the board of incidents. 8-10 years ago, I wouldn't see any. And now they're climbing the board. Sometimes within any given quarter, they're in the top 5 or 6 category of suicide threats. So what do we do with that one? Well, I asked Dorothy Hall to help come up with some guidelines. And I know that we teach some of this in other areas, but these were the basic outline. This is the basic outline that she gave me. If while engaged in conversation with a customer, they express suicidal or homicidal comments, a typical way of handling this would be to try and provide them with their options, like hotline numbers, as we talked about in the other category, contacting their therapist if they have one, or calling an ambulance for them. If you don't feel the customer has the capacity, as you're engaged with them, to deal with or respond to it, then what do? Call the authorities. Don't let that be paying for them to take care of. And we just want to reiterate, in talking with legal, we do have the legal authority to share the name and location of a person who is threatening to harm him or herself and or others. That's the only time. Otherwise, be very careful in giving out information. But if there's a direct threat, now what's the difference between, can you tell me the difference between a direct threat and a not so direct threat? What are some examples? We're on the phone with somebody and
I'm going to kill you, I'm going to come kill you. It's direct.
that's pretty direct. Or if they say, I feel like killing somebody. Is that a different? Because a lot of people don't express themselves very well. And so sometimes they express their frustrations by saying things like, geez, I might as well kill myself. Geez, I feel like killing somebody. You know, those are not triggers for a major situation, right? But, as Matt said, if someone said, what's your name? I'm going to kill you. You watch out. Which office are you in? I'm coming to that office and I'm going to kill you. Or what if they say, I have no other options. I'm just going to kill myself. You see the difference? Those are direct threats that we need to respond to. If they're off the cuff, then don't go overboard. You should ask for a return call from law enforcement if you've sent, so we can try to get that information, close out the incident report if possible. Note, you should not typically call the customer's therapist unless there is a signed release and you have been in regular contact with him or her and regarding this customer. So Dorothy Hall wants us also to know that if we are in a crisis with someone, that there's these Google chats and Jabber set up so that we can get their help. She wants us to recognize also that we shouldn't just drop it in their lap. They're there to help us get through the crisis. All right, any questions on this? And then obviously we should follow it up with an incident report so we have that on record. Okay, violence in the workplace. What do you think makes a person angry?
We deny benefits.
Okay, when we deny benefits to them. What else makes us angry?
Lack of control.
Lack of control. And that kind of sums it up, doesn't it? A crisis, an unfortunate circumstance, or disappointment doesn't usually create violent behavior, does it? When someone's first told that they don't qualify for benefits, do you think they immediately get angry? No. Some might. There's that small percentage that are living on the edge of anger their whole life. But the majority of us think when we go to get something and we think we're going to get it and someone says no, what's our initial reaction? Disappointment, isn't it? We're disappointed. And so then we're almost confused. It's like, man, I went in there. It's like even that started as a little kid, didn't it? We go to mom or dad. And we fully expect them to just give it to us. And when they say no, whoa, I'm disappointed. And so then we go mull around that answer that we got. And then it starts to build, doesn't it? So typically when we and what we do tell someone they don't get the benefits or they don't get this, they're going to be confused. They're going to be dumbfounded, the majority of them. So what I want to reiterate here is violent behavior mostly builds in stages. It doesn't immediately come on unless someone's already angry about everything. So I want to talk about the escalation scale. Say that 2 or 3 times in a row. What typically happens when someone calls or comes in for benefits, and then we go through the process, then we tell them no. What happens? They're disappointed. So they go out, they go back, and they start rumoring or teasing or gossiping about it. That's just what we do. There's all kinds of words or terms, but basically you go back and you want to justify your reasoning for feeling hurt that you're not getting the benefit. So you go talk to others. You start saying things like that, stupid DWS. They don't know what they're doing. And then they start making fun of us, gossiping about us, trying to find other people in the community that might have been denied so they can build on that. And then they start going, DWS, they're a bunch of jerks. So typically, when we get to see them again, where might they be on the scale? Yeah. Well, first they'll come in and just see, man, I've been reinforced. I've been reinforced by others that you guys are wrong, so by dang, you're gonna let me know that I can get the benefit now. It's gonna be that simple. Well, has anything changed? So typically our front desk or someone or one of our employment counselors or somebody on the phone ends up telling them, well, you still don't qualify, and that's when they lash out. Right? So that's where we get them. So they start saying things like, you jerks, you need to give it to me. Well, we still can't. Then what do? They raise their voice, right? Why don't I get it? Well, I've explained it to you, sir. I've explained it to you, ma'am. Well, I don't get it. That's out of hand. So then they start saying, well, by dang, if I raise my voice and maybe throw in a, you, effing, start throwing in a few expletives, that'll surely change your mind, right? No problem there. Does that change the rules? So then they get a little louder, and hopefully it'll end there. But what happens when we get to threats? What is the threshold? Well, we talked a little bit about it. If it becomes more of a direct threat, I'm going to kill you.
It moves from intimidating behavior to unlawful behavior.
Exactly. So it's a different situation. But let's talk about some of the things that in this situation that create a problem. If we can recognize the behavior in its early stages, we might be able to curb it a lot faster. But sometimes we don't get to see them till they're right here, demanding, yelling stage. Be careful how we react when they're coming in that mode. What are some of the things that we do that make that angry person, that has built it up in their mind, go over the threshold or increase in anger? What are some of the things that we do? How about what kind of words do we say that get us into trouble when we're dealing with an angry customer? I see it in incident reports all the time. Do you think of any?
I know how you feel.
You don't know how I feel. You have no idea how I feel. You got a job sitting there, you smug. That, and you might really know how they feel, but a angry person does not want to hear that, do they? What else do we say that's similar?
Calm down.
You calm down. Who do you think you are telling me to calm down? You sitting there with your nice job and that pretty outfit. I got nothing. An angry person never wants to be told to calm down. Every time I see that in an incident report, I can tell immediately the rest of the report's going to show how that person got out of hand. And the other thing we might want to avoid is kind of like, I know how you feel, is I understand. You understand nothing. So those are just simple phrases that we all do that get us into trouble. What about our demeanor? What kind of things do we do in our demeanor that get us into trouble? raise our voice and volume.
Fail to listen, act dismissive.
Act dismissive. And that really becomes with a lot of our body language and behavior. We can either be dismissive in the sense like, I've already gone over this with you, buddy. Or, you're wasting your breath. You know, there's all kinds of things that we do that will get them more fired up. There's nothing worse, and we have to be careful as human beings because we can often roll our eyes and not even realize it. Just a simple could send somebody over the edge. So we have to be really careful about our words and our demeanor, and the things that we say. So there's lots of things. I mean, and there's the opposite side of the coin, isn't there? We talk about remaining calm. Well, can that have a negative effect also? If I'm angry and I'm coming to you and I'm talking to you about things and I'm really going after it, and I got my voice up here kind of loud, and you talk back to me like this, how does that make me feel? How does it make you feel? Isn't it kind of irritating? It's kind of creepy, actually. You know, so if somebody is like overly calm, overly sweet.
Well, it comes across kind of a bit of smugness if you're super calm.
Exactly. And it's irritating. And you can almost guarantee it will set the person off more. Because then they might, if they're a little bit smarter, they're going to realize that I'm out of control and you smug son of a gun is way in control. That makes me mad. So yes, we want to remain calm. We don't want to panic in our minds. But we also don't want to act like somebody that's not natural. I mean, how do you feel when you go to a restaurant and you order or you get the menu and the waitress comes up and goes, "How can I help you today? See anything you like on that menu?" What does that do to you?
Depends on the waitress.
Yeah, it depends on the waitress. But if I, but aren't you often thinking, and I often think it's like, do you really talk that way to your coworkers, to your boyfriend, your spouse, your children? Is that the way you talk to them? You know, it can be irritating to me. So we've got to be very careful in our professional status and dealing with work and dealing with customers that we don't come across with these little pat answers or little sweet, overly sweet stuff, especially when somebody's angry, because that will send them over the edge. All right? So enough with that. We got to be careful on what we say. So recap, avoid talking about things like, "I know how you feel, I understand, you need to calm down." Those I can almost guarantee you in every incident report when I see that, and what's funny is that the security guard or the worker will admit that they said those things. They actually said, "I told them to calm down. I told them I understood what they were saying. I tried to express that I knew how they felt." Well, that will just make them angry. So avoid that. Work with your employees. So recap here, watch your body language. Honor and demand respect of personal space. Now this is the one thing that I like to review is that if someone's coming up, Matt, come up here for a second.
Oh, why me?
You're first in the row. Okay, what's good personal space?
About this far.
About this far. What would you say that is?
About 3 feet.
Yeah, about 3 feet. Why is that good personal space?
So get closer in it, and then you're within striking range.
You're within arm's length, right? And basically you want to be arm's length plus about 2-3 hands. All right? That's normal personal space with anyone. All right? When does it become an invasion of your personal space?
When I'd say within that reach, yeah.
Okay? So stay here. So how do you feel, even though you know me, when I get up like this?
Good to say that.
Almost immediately, within a few seconds, he wants to back off. Isn't that normal?
No.
Now, if you're sitting down, what's the personal space? And I'm standing. Is it greater?
Further, yeah.
Yeah, why is it?
Because of the disparity in height and
Exactly, and the fact that you're sitting down, I'm up, there's a lot less reactionary time that you would have if I had advanced. So the minute you're sitting down or in that situation. So it'd be nice, and I don't know if people can see this on camera, very good, but it'd be nice if sometimes we built this little ring and walked around establishing our personal space. But we don't have that.
you done with me?
And of course, yeah, I'm done with you. But that is a real problem because when someone's angry and someone sometimes of low mentality or when someone's just plain angry, do they automatically respect your personal space? Sometimes they don't. So what do you do if someone comes rushing into that 3-foot circle? That's the time that you're super direct. You have to be very careful in the fact that you don't come across as aggressive. So if you're walking towards me, you go, stop. I'll respect your space if you respect mine. Don't throw your hand out like this young lady. But if you are violating someone's personal space, does anybody know what that movie is? Sandra Bullock, Ryan Reynolds. Proposal. It's good. If you invade someone's space, then you have, or if someone invades your space, you have the right to do that. And it's amazing that if you do it that way, that a good 7, 8 out of 10 times, someone will stop and respect it. But you have to be very careful. Plan it out. Practice it. Stop. I'll respect your personal space if you respect mine. So that's something that you should demand. Be careful with your voice and volume and tone. We talked about that. If you're overly sweet, it comes across putrid, don't be too loud. Be sincere, tell yourself now and many times before you end up facing that angry person that it's not personal, that you genuinely care about that person. This will ultimately be your best defense. Now that's a paragraph that I like to really push, and I hope you push as supervisors, that if you can imagine that everyone coming in the office is like some cousin. You know, everybody has that jerky cousin in their family. That jerky brother, that jerky sister. But you got to love them instead, in spite of them. If you can have that thought process in your mind with every customer, it's amazing how much better it will go in that situation. And that's the toughest thing for us to do, is genuinely feel like it's not personal. They're just angry, all right? Be a good listener. So we've talked about all the do's, what we do, and the don'ts. How do we combat it? What's the best way? There's lots of things that we can do, but the best one that I found is basically, if someone's angry, you're not going to fix it right then. How many times have we fixed something when someone's angry? So the best thing you can do is listen to their rant. They're going off, they're going crazy, and you listen to them and you find one item you think that kind of makes sense. Sometimes everything they say doesn't make sense, but try to find something that makes the most sense. And that's the one item that you'll repeat back. Now, there's lots of trainings out there that say be a good reflective listener. Well, what happens if you're overly reflective? Everything you say, you repeat back. That'll make them angry. But if you listen really good, pick out that one item, go, hey, let me cover that item. And then you repeat that item. Say, that made a lot of sense. You know, I don't know if we can fix things, but there's a good chance with that. How about I investigate that, get my supervisor, and would you be available tomorrow for an appointment around 10 o'clock? Call them on the phone, or can you come in? And we'll have my supervisor there and we'll deal with that issue. We found that the majority of the time, if you can diffuse it like that, put it off, they'll come back in. Either they won't come back in at all because they're embarrassed that they lost their cool, or they'll come in and you can actually talk about things to do. So, and that's not the pat answer for everything, but it does work really well. Any other questions on dealing with behaviors like that? It's kind of a quick recap. What's your greatest fear as far as violence in the workplace these days?
One of my employees getting hurt.
Okay, as a supervisor, a person getting hurt from a customer. But generally overall, active shooter, isn't it? So that's why we put the segment of active shooter together. And you've all been through that, right? So we won't go over that. I just wanted to quickly review that. As a supervisor, you should be aware of these things, that it is on the rise, but statistically speaking, still, it's a low percentage compared to all the population of our country. But they are on the rise. We had some exceptionally bad years in 09, 10, and 12, and 13. And I haven't got it on there, but I believe it's dropped off a little bit. The other study shows that commerce is the biggest area. Education, higher education is where the next areas of these occurrences. Government is actually really low, and as far as state government, it's almost negligible. So that's the one positive note, is that these were the only government facilities that were targeted during those years. Does that mean we should not be vigilant? No. So what do we do with this one? Run, hide, and fight. We should all get that in our heads. It's kind of like the drop, cover, and hold on. Promote that. And just a quick review, the run, that's your first option. Get out of there. Try to get others to get out with you. If they don't, what do? Leave them. Hide. You should all be looking in your facilities. What's the best place to hide if you're unable to escape? Get out of the shooter's view. Fight as the ultimate option. Figure out what you would use as weapons and attempt to take out the shooter if that's your last option. Key here is committing to your actions. Remain calm, follow instructions. We've all talked about this. Avoid pointing and yelling. Know that 911 has your backs the best they can for the situation. Until it's diffused, some people just won't get the help they need. All right, any questions on any of that? The reason I go over a lot on violence in the workplace is because until the incident categories come down, then we're going to keep concentrating on that. Okay, since we always end with having an incident report made, which is very important, I want to go over how to get to the incident report page and talk about that. With the new intranet, you basically go to divisions, click on administrative support, facilities and risk, click on report an incident, online 485 form. When that comes up, and you click on that, I am submitting an incident report or completing an existing report. Now just so that you're aware, there says down here, incident report form in Word doc. The old incident report form is there. If you can't do it online, then print one of those up and have someone fill that out. But we would prefer that if you can, if you're filling it out, to do it online. So then when that comes up, create a new incident report, or if you've had some other incident reports that you have filled out, it'll show up and populate there. So you might click on the one that you need to finish or give more information, all right? So you just basically fill out the box. One of the key components is make sure that you put the right date in there in the proper format, because sometimes it'll kick it out and all your fields will disappear if you don't put the date in there. Hopefully we've got that fixed, but it still glitches once in a while. Basically click, once you've filled it out, submit and print this incident report or save to complete at a later time. So if you do that, it'll show up in that grid underneath and you can bring it back up. All right? Another key component to this is if it's a possible workers' comp claim, meaning that they got some kind of an injury and they're probably going to see a medical professional, or they might, then you basically need to fill out the possible workers' comp claim. Once you press that box, then these additional boxes will drop down. This information is given to our HR people so that they can get that in the proper online through workers' comp. So basically, fill that out, and then again, submit and print this incident report, or save to complete at a later time if you're waiting for some more information. Okay? So then once you do that, you just print the report, and it'll print you a summary that you can have for yourself. We used to have you send one to me, but if you do it online, you don't need to send me a copy. I just automatically get one. Okay, just a couple more things to finish off. As was brought up, probably the most costly incident to you is, and to our workers, is slip and falls. They can be the most devastating for multiple reasons. Lost job, lost wages, a lifetime of misery. So where do you think most of our slips and falls occur?
In the winter on the ice.
You'd think, and probably yes, but where is that? It's between parking lot or the sidewalks, basically between where you park or where you get off the bus and where work is, right? But it happens all year long, not just the winter. So what's going on?
People are texting, they're not paying attention.
Exactly.
Everything else.
And so we're not thinking about walking. We must think about walking. If you see a coworker, you're walking with them, and they're texting, or they're carrying all kinds of crazy things, try to tell them to stop that, because that's the problem. All right? I used to promote, especially in the winter when it's extra tough, is I tell people in a parking lot, count your steps. If you're concentrating on counting your steps, estimate from here to the building, I think it's going to be 150. Let's see if I'm right. 1, 2, 3. What are you doing? That forces you to concentrate on your walking. And if you do that, it's just like we hear about the penguin walk. I call it my Grandpa Otto walk when he had his cataracts. You know, if we're careful, we won't slip and fall. It's when we're not thinking about it. So please promote that. This is the scariest one for us as an agency. Next thing is proper lifting. We should try to avoid that as much as we can. Back injuries are the next biggest problem. Don't allow yourself or a coworker to lift if they don't need to, and especially improperly. Okay? Any questions on that? If you see somebody doing something stupid, doing a lot of twisting, bending over at the waist, stop them. If they're lifting things they shouldn't be lifting, and it should be somebody else's job, let them do it. Okay, one other thing we want to throw in here is that there's been a problem, especially in some of our large facilities. We've asked the security officers in our larger facilities, but it's also in policy that we wear our badges, and they should be visible. And so I just wanted to put this in so that you're aware of it. That although access cards are not necessary to gain access to facilities during normal business hours, it is intended that employee identification access cards be visibly displayed at all times. And I just want to forewarn you, I'm hearing rumors that some of the federal guidelines that we might have might require us to not even be able to use these. We might have to have them above the waist. So if that directive comes out, those of us that wear it on our belts might have to have the lanyard or have it above the waist. So, but it is policy, so don't give our security officers a hard time. Don't give us a hard time. It is policy. Okay, I also get a lot of questions about open carry, especially in our ECs, our employment centers. Legal helped me put this together along with risk. It is the directive of DWS that any person or persons who enter the property or facility with an open carry weapon will only be observed and not approached or engaged in questioning unless there exists probable cause or reasonable suspicion of criminal activity. Police should only be called if their actions warrant reasonable suspicion of illegal or dangerous behavior. Is that clear? Any questions on that? Any other questions? How about concealed weapons? You have questions about that? Are we allowed to have concealed weapons? We certainly don't want to promote it, but it is state law. We are a state agency. There are certain restricted areas like airports and federal institutions and schools and churches, but as a state agency, people are allowed to have them. Now, if that doesn't mean that someone's flaunting or saying, hey, look what I got strapped to my ankle, see what I got here. If you've been to a proper class, a concealed carry class, you know that's not proper behavior. If that kind of behavior is going on, please let me know. But if you accidentally see it, their pant leg hikes up and you see a gun, something, they're not purposely trying to show it off. Just let it go. If someone makes a complaint, let me know and we'll deal with it. Any questions? Okay. And finally, this is becoming a big deal. We've had 3 eligibility hearings for employees from DWS that were cited for texting while driving. And so far, the first offenses have been fairly light, only a week or 2 suspension. But if it's a second offense, then it'll be greater. So please be careful and make sure you let your employees know that this is real. And even if, and the 3 that I went to eligibility hearings, they weren't driving state vehicles. They were driving their own vehicle, but got cited for it. We heard about it. All right? So just make sure you let your employees know that that's a dangerous business, because we know that it's, as they've likened it to being impaired with alcohol driving. And finally, try to promote that your employees don't come in sick. Flu's been really bad this year, kind of a bad flu. I had a fever for a week, and I would like to kill the person who gave it to me if I knew who it was. But and that wasn't a direct threat. That was an off the cuff. No, but really, somebody with a compromised immune system could actually die from the flu. So it's a dangerous situation. Obviously, if someone comes in sick, if you as a supervisor say, go home, what kind of problems might that create? So you want to promote it, not give it as a directive, is what I'm trying to say. Because if you give it as a directive, what may happen? HR?
It's a directive, then it probably is administrative leave, not their sick leave. So.
Exactly. So try to promote it. Remind them that as your supervisor, I'm not going to get you in trouble, but if you got a fever, stay home. And I like to say, for at least 24 hours of a non-medicated, no fever. You follow me on that? If you've stopped taking Tylenol or ibuprofen or aspirin, and a good 24 to 48 hours you haven't got a fever, then it's not as dangerous. All right? So promote that. Any questions on that? If you see people not washing their hands, remind them. Try to keep your hands away from your face. All right? That's my overview. Any questions relating to risks that I didn't cover that you'd like me to cover?
I'm curious, Corey, what's, most of our offices around the state have security guards, some don't. I'm just curious what the threshold is or what the criteria is for when there is versus a security guard.
When we put one in? Well, basically it's our larger facilities, and it often depends on the amount of incident reports we're getting. And it's a area director preference. We had, for example, our Provo office at times has had an increase in incidents. And other times we'll go several quarters and no incidents. And they had a security guard, but they decided in that area they didn't want one anymore. They felt like it was more of a hindrance. And we recognize that security officers in some facilities actually do create more of a problem. Or because they're not busy, they're being asked to do work that our people should be doing. So we look at many different aspects of that. So there is no real pat answer, but typically it's based on the amount of incidents that are taking place, and that typically would be in our larger facilities. And then obviously an administration building, you had your security. Does that answer your question? Anything else from risk that you'd like me to answer? All right, for those of you in virtual reality land, if there's questions about risk that you don't feel like I covered, please email me, cmos@utah.gov, and I'll be happy to respond to that email and then incorporate it in future trainings. So appreciate your attendance. Thanks for your time. Hopefully you learned something and that we'll all be safer. So this is CMOS out. Bye.